Hi, I'm Jennifer Potter, Executive Director of Be Well Texas. Too many people are struggling alone these days, and alcohol and drug deaths are increasing. We started Be Well Texas to offer high-quality, science-based addiction treatment and recovery services anywhere, even at home. We provide compassionate, caring support virtually or in person. In many cases, there is no cost for treatment if you don't have insurance. Really. Welcome to Be Well Texas. We're glad you're here.
I want to talk about something that's been really exciting around here, and that is our partnership with our friends at Ford. Ford Motor Company and your North Texas Ford, or your Texas Ford dealers have announced an expanded sponsorship of the UIL State Championships, solidifying Ford as the official automotive sponsor of the UIL. As part of the new commitment, Ford will now support all UIL extracurricular activities, including athletic, academic, and music state championship competitions. In addition to the sponsorship, Ford is celebrating the 20th anniversary of the prestigious Built Ford Tough Player of the Week Award and Player of the Year Award. This campaign has become one of the most celebrated in Texas high school sports, recognizing standout athletes, student athletes, for their on-field performance, leadership, and commitment to excellence. Ford will honor some of the most decorated players who have received the award over the years, with a special focus being on their achievements both in high school and beyond. Guys like Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, all former Built Ford Tough Players of the Year, and we're partnering with them to amplify that. Dave Campbell's Texas Football, we're going to be amplifying the celebration through our partnership through all of our different platforms, so Texan Live, as well as here on this program and over the course of our social media as well, and TexasFootball.com. We're really, really excited to be partnering with Ford to help celebrate all of the things in Texas high school sports across the landscape. So more to come on that. There's more information on TexasFootball.com, but we're so thrilled to announce that partnership in Texas and the Texas Ford Dealers' expanded partnership as the official automotive sponsor of partner of the UIL State Championships. We certainly are very, very excited about the future there.
Welcome to a special edition of Dave Campbell's Texas College Football Podcast. I am senior writer Mike Craven. This episode is all TCU Horned Frogs. We're going to talk to an expert from all 13 FBS teams between now and the start of fall camp. And we're starting in Funky Town with Jamie Plunkett of Frogs Insider of the Republic of Football podcast. Jamie, thanks for coming on. And I'll start with this. What are the vibes right now for TCU football heading into 2025, year 4, obviously, for Sonny Dykes?
Mike, first, thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it. Love being part of the network. And the vibes in Fort Worth are really good, I would say. We just got to sit down with Sonny earlier this week, the week that we're recording this episode, so about middle of June. And he was in a great mood. He's loving the new OTA season in June, getting to be with the team, getting to see them have some fun together. They've been go-karting. They've done a team spelling bee, which they posted some clips of on social media. And they're just in getting all of these new faces kind of brought into the culture and the family that is TCU football. He was in a great mood. He said that he's having the most fun he's ever had coaching football in this new rev share era. And vibes are really high. You know, they're returning a lot of talent, got some really exciting new faces in the locker room as well. And all things are pointing north in Funky Town.
Yeah, he told me he thinks this is the best roster he's had ever in his coaching career, just because he feels like all 85 can go play some football. You know, there's not the 20, 25 at the bottom of the roster. I think that's probably true at a lot of P4 places, just because the transfer portal allows you to kind of cycle some of those guys out, or they cycle themselves out to go get, more playing time. But his tenure's been interesting, right? Like, you go to the national championship game, then you miss a bowl game. Last year, you kind of start a little slow, and it's like, uh-oh, how is this going to go? And then 6 of their last 7, that one loss being a 3-point loss on the road to a good Baylor team. How would you go about kind of grading or breaking down Sonny's tenure so far?
I'd give it a B plus. I think, obviously you can't take away what he did in year 1, getting them to the national championship game. You saw kind of the vision, I think, that season with what he could do when he had a roster that was loaded with veteran talent. And now the last couple of years, it's been, can he recreate that kind of roster through the transfer portal, through high school recruiting and development? And we've seen the ups and downs of a team that's really early on in that recruiting cycle. Now I think we're about to see what it looks like when Sonny has another veteran talented roster, on the sideline with him. I think he's done a great job recruiting at the high school ranks. He hasn't forgotten it in this era of transfer portal when it seems like it's so easy just to snap up a veteran kid from an Incarnate Word or a Oklahoma State or somewhere like that and just plug them into the roster. But they've got a lot of young guys that have been in the system for a couple of years under Kendall Briles on offense and year 2 under Andy Avalos on defense that are developing and learning the playbook and really going to come in, I think, and make a difference in 2025. So B+ right now, with a chance, if he gets back to 9-10 wins this year, to get a really good grade again.
Now, one of my favorite parts of this job is kind of getting to go around in the spring and talk to all the coaches and just make stop-ins. And, I went to TCU on a Wednesday and Texas Tech on a Thursday because I could just kind of leave Fort Worth, drive to Lubbock, and then make it a triangle back to Austin. And it just struck me, right? Like TCU's betting on continuity. Coordinator's back. Not as much transfer portal stuff, signed the best class 2 out of the last 3 years in the state if we go past, Texas and Texas A&M. And then you look at Texas Tech and it's so transfer portal heavy, 2 new coordinators, but a lot of buzz there. Do you think TCU is kind of getting forgotten about in the 2025 conversation because they didn't make as many splashes maybe in the offseason as we're kind of getting used to now in the college football calendar?
I think that's probably true. And I think that's kind of how Sonny might like it. Let everybody else win the offseason. That's totally fine. As long as you're getting out there on Saturdays and you're passing the test and you're putting up wins. I think that's okay with him. And, like you said, with Texas Tech, they've spent a ton of money. They've got a really good NIL system that they've had, thanks to Cody Campbell and some other big boosters there over the last few years. The question now is, and I think you wrote a great article about this recently, which style is going to work? Is it still really important to develop high school kids, or can you get a lot of mercenaries to mesh and build a culture and still win some football games as well? So that's a test that I think is going to play out over the course of this 25 season. I think Sonny's fine. Really, really pleased, frankly, with the way his roster looks right now and the way he's gone about building it. And, we'll see when the results matter here in the fall.
So what are your just kind of overall broad stroke expectations of what this team can be in 2025? So before we start digging into like positions and stuff.
Sure. I think it's really going to be a kind of an interesting season because there's a feeling all through that program that this is going to be an incredibly talented football team. You've mentioned that you've talked to Sonny about it. He's told us that a bunch of times he thinks this is the most talented roster he's ever had. And it looks like it when you go watch them the last half of last season, this spring, they looked great. And then you look at the schedule that they've got, and it's a much harder schedule this year than it was last year. They didn't play a ranked team in all of 2024, and they went 9-4, had a really good back half of the season, like you mentioned. But this year they get Kansas State and Arizona State and BYU and a bunch of these teams that they missed that finished at the top half of the Big 12 a year ago, and bring back veteran quarterbacks, a lot of talent. So is the talent on TCU's roster, which should be able to stack up with everybody in the Big 12, going to bear out in a way that shows improvement in the win column? Because you won 9 games last year. Can you get to 9 or 10 again this year against what I think is a much more difficult schedule than a season ago? That's going to kind of be the big question. They're talented without a doubt. The schedule challenge, I think, is something that's going to give people pause.
I'm doing kind of a schedule analysis for every single FBS team. One, because it's like June and we need some content. But also like I wanted to kind of dig into like what the most important stretches are. And one of the labels is like can't lose, right? Like this team can't lose this game. And for a lot of them, I chose teams that were really bad that you just can't get upset by. For TCU, I'm choosing North Carolina in week 1 because I saw what happened in 2023 when they lost to Colorado, and it just felt like it deflated them. All eyes are going to be on that game and to see what Bill Belichick is and what North Carolina is. It's on its own on September 1st. How important is it for TCU to just like get off to a fresh start, to have the narrative of like for the Big 12 even, right? Of like, a good team of yours beat a good ACC team. Like, how important do you think that week one game is?
I think it's huge for all the reasons you mentioned. And I still think that when people mention TCU, the next thing they say is, well, you know what happened in the national championship game. And so I think 2025 can be the year where TCU starts to move people past that knock on their program with, hey, all right, they came out in week one, they beat a really good North Carolina team, or they beat Bill Belichick in week one of him being a college football coach. And that sets them up to do X, Y, and Z in the Big 12 this year, in a league that I think has gained a lot of respect nationally over the last year and a half with its parity, with the level of competition that we've seen outside of the league as well. And, week one sets the tone. Obviously, if you ask anybody in the program, they're going to say, well, it's just the first game of the year. They're 12, 13, whatever. But you're right. The Colorado game in 23 was a big knock, and it kind of crippled them. And you don't want to see the same thing happen to start 2025.
How close was Josh Hoover to leaving? I know he kind of addressed this week and stuff, but that was kind of a big talking point this offseason. Like, from your vantage point, how did that go?
It wasn't even a question in his mind. I heard the rumor that some schools were going to start calling him, and obviously everyone talked about Tennessee being the big one that tried to get him to hit the portal. I'm not even sure if he had a full phone call with anybody associated with TCU. I think it made it to his agent and he wasn't interested, so he didn't even pick up the phone. He's got a great rev share / NIL deal at TCU. He loves TCU. He was the first guy, people forget, he was the first guy to commit to Sonny Dykes when Sonny Dykes got to TCU. He flipped from Indiana like 2 weeks before National Signing Day and is the first guy, that's really truly Sonny's recruit at TCU. And this is where he wanted to be. He talked about it earlier this week, saying he loves Fort Worth. He wants to set a good example for his team. He told his team he was going to be the quarterback here this year, and he meant it, and he stood by it. And so I think it says a lot about a kid in this era to turn down, what was really good money. Not that he's not getting good money from TCU, but to kind of stand up and say, no, this is where I want to be. And this is, where I'm going to play this year.
I feel like we're going to start seeing some TCU players on Landman. Like, you have to like fold some NIL deals into that deal, take advantage of that. We'll see if that goes. Speaking of the offense, like, what do you think obviously strength is probably going to be Josh Hoover in this passing game. Like, just strengths and weaknesses, kind of what's your outlook for that unit this year?
Yeah, I think offensively they've got to figure out a running game. So if you're talking about strengths, I think it's still the passing game, in spite of losing Jack Besh, J.P. Richardson, Savion Williams are all gone. But you keep Eric McAllister. You bring in two really good transfers in Jordan Dwyer and Joseph Manjack. So you got a freshman in Ed Small who was wildly impressive in the spring as well. And so I think this passing game is setting up to be really successful again in 2025. If they can find some semblance of a running game to balance it out, I think it's going to be a very impressive offense. And then defensively, they were very good in the back half of 2024. Once they figured out Avalos' system and really started to feel comfortable, now it's year two, and you return a ton of veteran guys. I mean, Bud Clark found another year of eligibility. Nambi Obiezor and Devin Deal both found another year of eligibility. So you've got some real veteran leadership and talent on that side of the football that's playing in the same system for another year. So you look at both sides of the ball, and just generally, you should expect both of these sides are going to take a step forward.
Do you have a favorite to lead the team in rushing, or do you think it'll be purely by committee and they'll find that out in October who the guy is?
I think it's going to start out like that, a little bit committee. They have a ton of really talented guys, in my opinion. I think the guy that could be the standout at the end of the season is Nate Palmer. He's a redshirt kid who, let me make sure I get this right because there's so many of them. He's from Decatur. He's in his sophomore year or redshirt freshman year now, about 6 foot 190, really strong runner, doesn't shy away from contact, but also has that breakaway speed. Didn't see a ton of him last year. He obviously played fewer than 4 games, had a fellow freshman kind of stand up, Jeremy Payne, who saw a little bit more of that playing time last year. But I think Nate Palmer is going to be a guy by the end of 2025 who we're all looking back and saying, wow, he had a really impressive season.
Yeah, I think Kavorian Barnes is another name to watch there. I know, like, once the pads came on, they liked what they saw there in the spring. Like, a really good player at UTSA, like, when he was in it. Just kind of fell into the doghouse, I think, his last year. We'll see if he could rebound there. But, like, I think Josh Hoover is good enough, and that passing game is good enough to win you 8 or 9 games to like get into the Big 12 contention. Like you're going to have to be balanced. Like we saw that some last year in those big games. Like you just put too much on him, and then there's the turnover situation, and like it
Right.
felt like they got better at that in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And if they had a better running game last year, they probably end up beating UCF. They probably end up beating Houston as well. And so you add two to the win ledger there, and all of a sudden they're at 11. Last season, you're talking about a team that was probably in the running to be in the Big 12 championship. And so you're absolutely right. If they can find some semblance of running game, I think they're going to be really successful. And to Barnes' extent too, I think they really do like him, and they want him in those kind of bigger back, shorter down situations, goal line situations, and that's what they've tried to do with this running back room is construct a room that has versatility, where you can go to certain guys. Hey, it's third down, we need a guy out of the backfield to catch a pass, or we need a guy in pass protection, or it's short down situation. They've got a guy they can call on for pretty much anything they need. Now it's about those guys stepping up and doing it.
Who do you think the most impact transfer will be this year?
It's got to be Jordan Dwyer, the wide receiver from Idaho, D2 or an FCS kid who just lit the world on fire last year at Idaho. Incredibly fast, runs crisp routes, connected with Hoover immediately, and looked fantastic in the spring. Made some circus catches, even though he's not the tallest guy in the world. And I think you add him to a room that already had Eric McAllister, and you feel really confident in what those wide receivers are going to be able to do. So I would look for him to have a pretty big season as the number 2 guy in that passing game. And then you've also got Joe Manjack, who could be a sleeper pick as well from that wide receiver group that transferred in.
How confident are you 1 to 10 that Eric McAllister becomes the guy it seems like everybody at TCU thinks he's going to become?
Gosh, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. I'm going to try to not sound like a homer here and say probably somewhere between 7 and 8. We saw really impressive flashes from him last year. He was obviously behind Savion Williams for much of the year until Savion started to do that kind of hybrid running back role when Eric got some more time on the field. I thought Eric looked great in the bowl game. He had 9 first half catches and a toe tap touchdown in the back of the end zone. He's got a great relationship with Josh as well. And he's, by all accounts, really stepped up as a leader in that room. And so if you look at all of the offseason boxes, incredible athleticism, a history of production, growing into a leadership role, he's checked them all. And now it's a matter of going out and actually being that guy come Saturdays in the fall. But I see no reason why he shouldn't step up into that role and have a lot of success.
I don't think I received as much hate mail as anything this offseason I did as the Texas 10 wide receivers, and I left off McAllister and just got absolutely plastered for it. From inside the TCU building, from outside the TCU building, and that's probably fair. He's probably going to be really, really good. Defensively, talking to Avalos, it feels like he had some injuries last year on the edge. He had some injuries at cornerback, but like that's created some depth that he's really excited about. He thinks it's going to be like a net positive for this team.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that concerns you on the defensive side of the ball, like as we sit here in June?
I mean, the fact that you lost your 2 top corners to ACL injuries last year, and now you're hoping that they're both back and healthy and fully capable. I think that's probably the biggest question mark, because Avery Helm and Vernon Glover, like those are 2 really talented guys who lost all of 2024. And if they do come back and have full confidence in those knees and full confidence in the system, I think that was really where TCU struggled at times last year. Was, hey, we've really got to lock these guys down so we can bring an extra safety into the box to help with our run defense, which struggled. Getting those guys back and getting them back healthy is going to be critically important. The other thing I would say is, how does that front 7 improve against the run? Because again, going back to that UCF game, that's how they came back late and really took over late, was just giving it to RJ Harvey and saying, go get 8 yards a carry. And TCU really couldn't do anything about it. So loading up the box was what TCU tried to do. That exposed some of their cornerback issues. If they can get away from that, or if they can do that with confidence in their corners, I think we'll see a more consistently solid defense this season.
Kind of moving off the field a little bit, like to your point earlier, like the schedule is really tough. And one of the reasons it's tough is the non-con is pretty hard, right? You're playing at North Carolina. Obviously, SMU's coming in, the last scheduled, a battle for the Iron Skillet. If you're in control of the TCU athletic program, the football team, like how are you scheduling moving forward with 9 conference games and probably going to 16 playoff teams? Like, what do you think the right strategy is there?
Well, it's similar to what we see, I think, in basketball and baseball right now, which is how do you play the RPI game in both of those sports? How do you play the theoretical RPI game in football? I think is to get teams that maybe are solid G5 teams who you have a really nice chance of beating. Try to preserve a rivalry here and there where you can, but the reality is if you're in the Big 12, which is a league that is notorious for beating up on each other and handing everybody 2 or 3 losses, you can't really afford a loss in non-conference. And so you're probably going to schedule a little bit lighter if you want to make sure that, hey, if we're not going to win the league, we still have a really good shot at that second kind of at-large bid if that's going to be available for the Big 12. So do I agree with that as a fan? Do I want that as a fan? No, not necessarily. I love the non-con schedule this year. I think it's great, but I think you'll probably start to see TCU and a lot of other schools lighten up their non-conference load and really focus on what they can do in league to impress the selection committee.
It does feel like lines are being drawn in the sand between the 4-4-2-2 and the 5+11 model. We've just like flown the coop, and it's clear that we're going to get to 16. Maybe they just keep fighting. We don't get to 16, which I think would be positive. But let's just assume it's going to 16. As a Big 12 fan, what do you think is the best way to go for this conference? Like, which model would you support?
That's a good question. I go back and forth, frankly, Mike,
Me too.
because
Me too.
there's the guarantee of having 2 teams, I think, is really nice because the championship game doesn't matter less, but you don't have as much pressure going into that game for winning the league. But it's also an admission in a lot of ways that your league isn't as strong as the SEC and the Big Ten. And while that might be very clear on paper and on Saturdays for the most part, I don't think it's an admission that you want to make if you're the Big 12 or the ACC. And so while the 5+11 might give you less opportunity in some seasons, and you might only have one team in, if there's 4 or 5 SEC teams or Big Ten teams that get at large bids, I think that's the route that you have to argue for, and that's the route you need to go. I thought Tom Fornelli had a really nice proposal that he wrote up for CBS Sports a while back, where he said that go 5+11 or go 2-2-2-2, and then just cap the number of bids per league at 4. And so, yeah, the Big Ten and the SEC can have 3 auto bids. That's fine, but you're only going to get one at large team in. And that's going to open up space for other conferences and G5 schools to have opportunities to play in that playoff as well.
How do you think TCU's positioned to kind of handle the sports revenue model? And do you think that closes any of these gaps that have been building the last 5 or 10, I mean, the last 100 years, but specifically the last 5 or 10 years?
TCU is fully bought in to rev sharing. They're going to spend up to the 20.5 million cap this offseason. They are bringing their NIL operations in-house as well so that they can operate that a little bit more closely. Flying T Club has done an excellent job as a third party. What is it? Collective, I guess is what they're called. Over the last few years. I think they've raised close to $40 million for TCU NIL efforts, which is not a small chunk of change, even though, you're hearing what other schools might be spending up to above the cap this offseason. But I think it's really strong. They're committed to fully spending. They're committed to expanding scholarships, right? They're going to do all of the things that they need to do to remain as competitive as they possibly can. I sat down with Mike Buddy last week to talk just about that, and he gave me some really interesting insights saying, this is a university where the leadership top down, not just in the athletics department, but in the chancellor's office, is fully aligned with making athletics as competitive as possible and maintaining that competitive edge, because it's a part of the new strategic vision for TCU as a university for the next 10 years. It's got 4 pillars, and athletics is one of them, which not a lot of universities name athletics as a pillar of the university. And so TCU is bought in, not just financially, but in vision casting as well. And so I think that's going to lead to a lot of success for the athletic department and hopefully a lot of success on the field as well.
This might be putting you on the spot, and I apologize for that, but I'm fascinated with the hierarchy in this state. Like, I mean, I think we can all agree Texas and Texas A&M are the 2 best jobs, 2 best programs. Just the way they can recruit, the SEC money, history. I think that's okay to say. For the last 15 to 20 years, I would say TCU or Baylor is the 3rd best job in this state. You look at recruiting, and TCU out of that next tier 2, right? The Big 12 schools plus SMU. TCU's led in recruiting out of like 7 of the last 10 years, including 2 out of the last 3. They were alone in DFW. Obviously, plenty of money, great private school. Do you think TCU still in that mix? Where do you feel like they are with SMU, Tech, Baylor, TCU? I guess Houston's in that mix as well. Like, where do you see TCU in the modern pecking order of college football in the state?
Yeah, that's another great question, Mike. You're bringing it today.
I
you're
have a
right.
new baby. I have a new baby, and so I don't get to talk to anybody about sports and
That's
football
fair.
anymore. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
enjoying this
remember
a
those
lot.
days.
Yeah,
I remember those
yeah.
days, man. You can just hit up the phone anytime you need to.
Appreciate it.
Just
Yeah,
holler.
it'll be weird
Um,
times.
just 3 a.m. whatever it is. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Uh, no, I think TCU's still in that conversation for the third best job in the state. I think just with the resources they have, with the commitment they have made to athletics and continue to make, to not have them in the conversation would be a little ridiculous. But there's no doubt that Tech and SMU have made up ground. There's no doubt that despite some of the dips Baylor has had, they've made up ground as well. And I'm really interested to see what Willie Fritz can do at Houston, right? I mean, you look at Tech and Houston could follow that example pretty nicely. I mean, it's always good to have a billionaire in your back pocket, And so I think the conversation is those five schools. And I think each one has a legitimate argument to make about whether maybe not at this moment, but in the next 2 or 3 years, they could all easily be the third best job in the state. And so from TCU's perspective, what can you do and what are you doing to make sure that it is TCU and that it continues to be TCU, especially as the next round of realignment comes, because you want other teams to look favorably on you versus your in-state competitors when it comes to that.
What have your thoughts been on the new athletic director? You talked about your conversation with him earlier. I know sometimes leadership changes. It's, kind of met with some skepticism. Kind of what is your kind of initial impressions of him, I guess, 6 months onto the job or however long it's been?
Yeah, it's been about 6 months. I'm impressed by Mike. I think he's a much different personality than Jeremiah Donati was. Donati's incredibly outgoing, outspoken, involved in a lot of stuff very publicly, and Mike is thoughtful, a little bit on the quieter side until you get to know him. But he's intelligent. He obviously, with his background as being the AD at Army, has a lot of understanding of what structures and systems really work for an athletics department. And I think that's one of the things that TCU could use right now is a good structure. And so he brings that. I think he's delivering on that in his first 6 months. And I think he's the right guy for the job. I would like to see him speak a little bit more. I think it would be good for people to be talking about what TCU's athletic director thinks a little bit more, and just kind of keeping TCU front of mind in that conversation. Because you see a lot of that right now, right? Whether it's Kirby Hocutt at Tech or Damon at SMU talking a lot about what's going on. I'd like to see Mike do that a little bit more as well, just to kind of keep TCU front of mind. But I think he's internally doing a great job. He's set up to succeed, right? Because Donati did a fantastic job. That's why he's at South Carolina, is because he was a really attractive candidate. And so now it's just a matter of making sure that TCU continues moving in the right direction.
I know he's a baseball guy, which you appreciate. The day I was
do.
there for the magazine stuff, after our Q&A, he came down to practice and he was like walking around with a wooden baseball bat, and I was like, that's what I need from my athletic director. Just
Look,
like walking around. Like, was that Walking Dead where the dude had, just like, hey,
just a bunch of nails in it. Yeah.
Yeah, just in case you forgot who's in charge here, it's the guy with the baseball bat.
Yeah, no, he's great. And you play 13 years of professional baseball, it's going to be hard to shake some of that. I did ask him if he could still, if he had enough juice to maybe get Sawyer Strohsnyder out, which is TCU's freshman All-American this year. He said he could. He said he thinks he could get him out. He might need 20 tries, but he could strike him out at least once. And no, I think his professional
sounds like a content idea for you and Melissa,
yeah,
right there.
100%. And we're going to see if I think Mike and Sawyer will both be up for it. It's a matter of whether or not TCU's baseball coach is willing to sacrifice his young star, I guess. But no, I think his pro baseball background gives him an interesting perspective on what it takes to be a student athlete. I mean, he was a pitcher at Wake Forest. He went through all of that. He understands how good coaches can make an impact and how bad coaches can make an impact, and what structural things are needed for student athletes to really have success and thrive both on and off the field. So I think he's got a great perspective. Like I said, I think he's the right guy for the job in this moment for TCU, and just going to be really excited to see where his tenure leads.
And then back to 2025, before we close this stuff out, like, what's your record prediction? How do you kind of see this thing coming together here in Fort Worth.
Well, like I said, I think it's going to be a better team than it was in 2024. I think you're going to see them play at a consistent higher level than they did last season, but that schedule's so dang tough. I would love to see them get to around 9-3, 10-2. I think if you can do that with this schedule, that's proof of concept for Sonny saying, hey, 22 wasn't a fluke. I can build a roster. I can have success with veteran talent, and we can compete, in this really strong Big 12 conference that has a lot of parity. If it gets to the down below 8 to like the 7 or 6 win mark, even with a more talented roster, I think that's when, the fire starts to get a little bit warmer and some other conversations start to happen.
Of that conversation, like the win total was set at 6.5, which blew me away. It's the same as Houston's. And I understand the schedule. Like I've seen it. Like I get it. If TCU goes 6-6 or worse, is a change coming? Is it a hot seat going into the next year? Kind of like how Dave Aranda was last year. Like how quickly could this thing happen?
That's a great question. And with the new athletic director at the helm, if it was still Jeremiah Donati, I think there would be the answer would be much more, they're going to give him more time. But with the new AD and with the way TCU is investing, especially in football, a 6-6 season is going to be tough. It would be really, really tough to go 500 and to get, another, New Mexico Bowl like they got last year. I don't know that it would necessarily mean the end of Sonny's tenure at TCU, but I think there would be some real conversations that started to happen at that point.
Yeah, because college football is as fun as it is miserable for your neighbor, right? Like you are always in SMU's having success. Obviously, Tech. We'll see what Baylor is this year. You have to stack up to that. And just when I saw that 6.5 number, it was like, oh man, like you hit the under while those other three are competing for conference championships. Like it's hard not to play the compare game.
It is. And I think part of that, because if you look at the league's overall win totals, I think Vegas just might not have any idea what's going to happen in the Big 12 this year.
True. That's 100% true.
But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you're going to be a little bit quieter in the offseason and you're going to, but if you're going to just kind of watch as other teams in the league are kind of always front of mind in the media and are being talked about a lot in the offseason, you better come ready in the fall to take over and be the storyline, because you can't go a full calendar year off season and in season of just not being talked about being an afterthought. And so if you're comfortable with being a little quieter in May and June, you've got to make a lot of noise in November and December.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like you can approach it like Kansas State does, but then you got to win like Kansas State does on a consistent basis. Before I let you go, kind of who do you think the favorites are in the Big 12? I mean, I'm with you, right? I mean, everything's a coin flip. It's a 3-point spread league. Like it's awesome. Who do you think kind of emerges, and who do you think could be the Arizona State or the TCU of 23 of this year?
I think, it's hard not to go with Arizona State, even though they lost Scadaboo, just because you bring back your number one receiver, your number one quarterback. I think we see a little bit of a fall off from BYU this year. Baylor, I think, has maybe the best quarterback in the Big 12. I'm partial to Josh Hoover, but Sawyer Robertson had a great year last year, and now you're going to give him the reins from the get-go in week 1. I'll be really interested to see what that looks like. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was like a Baylor situation where they come up and they're all of a sudden, really kind of at the front of the class. TCU, I think, has the opportunity to do that as well. And Kansas State just kind of always does what it does and gets up there and finishes, in the top third of the conference. So I'm interested to see what you're looking at West Virginia and Houston. I think there's maybe a little bit of a rebuild there for both of those teams, even though WVU had some impressive wins last year. And then I just don't know what's going to happen to Kansas. I have no idea. You bring Jalen Daniels back, but what's he going to give you? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be hurt? Oklahoma State, I think, is fading, sadly, because I think they could be a great program if they really wanted to be. And who am I leaving out? UCF always seems to be solid. They're going to compete at the highest level. But yeah, I would say Baylor. Baylor is someone to keep an eye on. TCU is someone to keep an eye on. And then I think it's Arizona State's crown for someone else to take at this point.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by what happens with Utah. with their new quarterback there. I mean, for my purposes, Houston is a really interesting team just because there's such a line shift. Like
Hmm.
it feels like year two is year one, two new coordinators, a bunch of new players. But Big 12 is going to be fascinating. Not maybe not the best league in the world, but definitely the most fun, like the coolest league
Absolutely. Yeah.
in the world. The best travel destination league in the country as well, like city wise, like a tremendous road visitor situation across the country. So, Jamie, appreciate you coming on. Anything else you want to say, and like tell everybody where to find your work?
You can find my podcast, Frogs Insider. I host it with a good friend of mine, Melissa Treebwasser, over at the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football Network. We are a part of the network. Love being a part of that. Our show posts once a week in the off season, twice a week during football season. And then I'm also a staff writer over at 24/7 Sports for Horned Frog Blitz. So if you want to read what I'm writing about TCU, you can get over there and check out all of that as well.
All right, appreciate you, bud, and see you in a few short weeks at Big 12 Media Day as we start this thing off.
Looking forward to it, Mike. See you then.